Welcome, gentlemen. We don't have much time, so I'll dive in. By way of introducing yourselves, please tell us about your focus in respect to smart cities.
My main area is essentially advising governments around the world on how to make cities more sustainable, smarter, preparing for the future, and focusing essentially on our framework, which points out 10 major criteria. And I'm also sitting on the steering committee of UN Habitat's World Urban Campaign and a few other advisory boards and committees on this.
Is there starting to become a smart city template that's been exported around the world?
Yes, there's quite a few actually. Sustainable cities templates, smart cities template, and so forth. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And
Thank
it's
you.
developing, and and things are being changed and adapt, and it's evolving over time as we learn new things and what works and what doesn't really work.
Very good. And Erik?
My name is Erik Behm. I work on behalf of the City of Gothenburg. Business Region Gothenburg is a part of the City of Gothenburg. It's west coast of Sweden. We've done that for 40 years. And I would say smart cities, one thing was implemented, but we're also using test beds. My responsibility is the IT sector. The IT sector is the driver and the catalyst for the rest of the sectors. For example, electric buses, can be tested in Gothenburg and then exported to other metropolitan areas.
Mm-hmm. Now, cities were originally designed to have factories, to optimize supply chains and for goods out, and had to find some places to put the workers and get them to and from work. Are we simply making faster, smarter, cheaper versions of those?
It's tricky to say. I would say, yes, we are a little bit more commuting, but I always say that the workplaces are moving. We don't need to go to the office. We could work from home. We can work with smaller cities, and if you don't have the right discipline to be at home, you can be in a smaller city, your hometown, and then commute in certain days. Because people don't want to go to metropolitan areas all the days.
Okay.
I think a better way of master planning cities, that's very important. Preserving, also very important, I'd like to touch on, is preserving the biodiversity that we have, not only in the outskirts, but also in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I mean, some cities have shown they have increased the level of biodiversity by better way of master planning.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one criteria. And obviously, another major point I would say is focusing on more eco buildings, green buildings, better materials use to build, increasing renewable energy that's being used to power cities. Renewable energies we focus on mainly 4 different areas. Hydro, well, some people can argue it's not really renewable. But solar PV, solar thermal, and also obviously wind.
Well, as humans, we've got certain, if you like, anthropological needs, the need to be mobile, social, autonomous, creative, and so on. To what extent are we building these into cities of the future? And I know you've got the challenge that you've got a 400-year legacy.
It is a big question, yes. But on the other hand, one important part, I think, for a big city like Tokyo, New York, etc., with 20 million inhabitants is one thing. The whole of Nordics is 25 million inhabitants. So the city of Gothenburg is 500,000. We need to work much more with neighboring countries, because then we can get the critical mass and have better communication electronically and physically with the neighboring countries, because we should use each other. Then we need to work with, for example, Bulgaria, because there's very good IT companies and we have a big need of IT. That's the broader question.
So are you saying that there should be one ICT function for perhaps multiple countries in this respect?
Yes, we could complement. If we have a need, our big corporates have a need of innovation. They are looking for startups. And that is we're seeking globally.
Okay.
Because otherwise we can't compete.
So this is the birth of mega shared services?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, sharing services, you see a lot happening around the world. In China now, bike sharing is very popular and built on massive scale. I would say that cities, most cities obviously have been built and designed long time ago, so it's not really preparing ourselves for the future. So there's quite a few things that we have to change, which I mentioned before: master planning, better ways of master planning, adding renewable energy, waste management, water management, including things like industrial ecology and things like that, which I'll cover a bit later.
I mean, in practice, are you seeing countries planning new cities where they can actually start from scratch, or are they generally just building on something that already exists?
I work a lot in Asia, and in Asia, obviously, there's massive urbanization happening. In China alone, as you know, there's over 200 cities, big cities I'm talking about, and look at the urbanization rate. A few decades ago, it was around 20% urbanized, meaning 80% of Chinese were living in the rural areas. Now it's estimated it's over 50%. So 50% of Chinese, which is about 750 million people, are now urbanized. And that's what we do. We actually help people, and our advisors and our partners actually help governments make better decisions. Because no matter whether you like it or not, when you actually have such massive building, you're going to damage the environment. That's unavoidable. What we're trying to do is minimize the impact of doing all this. I'd like to bring up one statistics chart that actually Bill Gates actually brought up quite a few years ago. Just to show you the scale of what's happening. Between 2011 and 2013, just a 3-year period, China actually used more concrete than United States ever did in this entire 20th century for 100 years. So United States, in 100 years, during its busiest building period, China actually surpassed that by not only surpassing that, by surpassing it by another 50%. There's a lot of wastage I've seen in terms of infrastructure. I mean, of course, now China is still a developing country, but it's got first world infrastructure all around the country. But there's also a lot of wastage simply because it's a legacy of its central planning communist system where, and I'm pretty sure some of you are familiar with that, where they actually plan without consideration of market forces and things like that.
Then one challenge also is it should be top-down or bottom-up. Certain countries like France is doing cluster development top-down. Paris decided where should a cluster be. We're doing much more bottom-up, asking the companies what are they doing and what they would like to do. And then we try to merge different clusters. Cross-clustering it's called. And this is also in building cities. We need to involve the citizens. And I think that the bigger city, the surrounding cities, and the region has a role. The region need to challenge the cities, but also supporting them. If you have a good, active region, it's so much easier, because otherwise the cities are themselves, they need someone, a discussion partner. And we have that system, national, regional, and city in Sweden.
Yeah. That's great for existing cities. Obviously that's the way to go. But a lot of what we work with is creating cities, new cities. So obviously, you're talking about people moving into the cities. You've seen, for one city in China, for example, Shenzhen. 35 years ago, it was a fishing village. Now it's got a population of around 17 million people. Yeah, it's become basically one of China's Silicon Valley. Yeah, so in terms of scale, we're talking about totally different scales. Yeah, and involving citizens, it's hard sometimes because you're actually building the cities first and waiting for the people to move in. It's worked in quite a few different Chinese cities, for example. It has failed in others, for example, because in especially places like China, you can have a mayor deciding, okay, I want a new city next to mine. And that has happened before. And developers come in and build whole new sections. And if you go there at night, it's basically just a few lights on. It's estimated in China alone, there's actually, at the lowest estimate around 25, at the highest estimate around 65. Imagine 65 million empty dwellings. And you're talking about a country with the largest population in the world, 1.5 billion people.
Wow. What about cities that are constrained in terms of their, if you like, geographical spread? What are the smart initiatives that are allowing us to, if you like, live more densely?
I would say one important thing is that you don't need to move into those cities because everyone can't go in there. We need to be able to live on the countryside, on the smaller cities, and have the good IT infrastructure, feel that you're included. Because otherwise, we will in Sweden, it's a very, not as dense populated as a lot of other countries. We have a need of keeping the country together. We can't abandon part of the rural parts. That's important.
I think most European cities are great because it was built long time ago. Most cities in Europe built long time ago, and it's walkable. The opposite of LA, for example, built for cars, as you know, it's horrendous.
What are some of the more radical initiatives that you're seeing in the, if you like, the development of cities of the future?
I would say one important part is test beds, testing in a local scale and then possible to scale up. And we're using national test bed scheme, and this way, because then you can do the trial and error and see what's working, what's not working. For example, electric buses. We use electric buses in certain lanes. Volvo is doing that in Gothenburg. Then they can export it. So test beds is a national and regional policy for us. We're doing the same in China, I know.
And are you doing anything at this stage with IoT, big data?
Definitely, and also on the more softer, human-centric side, like elderly care, etc. It's more tricky in a different way. But you'll be using test beds for the all parts of the society.
Okay.
Exciting projects, there's thousands basically. Are you talking about companies involved in renewable energy? Are you talking about companies involved in IoT, waste management, and things like one thing I'd like to cover, one thing that's very interesting, I've been working with a company that is involved in IoT, in basically measuring what's happening with trees around the city. Because as you know, with the changing climate, a lot of trees around the cities will die. Unavoidable. So how do you actually manage this? You put devices in to actually measure the soil temperature and many other things, so you can actually treat the trees before they actually, before they falter, basically.
And then we have one thing with flooding, because if the sea level is rising, be prepared. Like London did 30 years ago, we need to do it now if it's rising sea level. This is also one thing to cope with.
Go ahead.
I think one thing we tend to forget is there's a lot of bias and vested interests around in this world. And that's why the right decisions are not being made. A lot of political decision makers are stuck in their ideology. So no matter what facts you show them, what numbers you show them, as long as it doesn't correspond with their ideological belief, they won't accept it. Yeah? So how do you actually overcome it? Instead of focusing on banging their head and saying, oh, climate change, climate change, climate change, you know some of these people will never accept. It's not bad in Europe. Europe is pretty good, but if you go to, for example, to the States, or even in my country, Australia, you get that factor, right-wing factor, where they actually totally deny climate change. So you cannot convince them that's happening. So how do you actually overcome that? You actually overcome that by basically showing them other benefits of having cleaner cities, healthier population, pollution reduction, additional green jobs, and things like that. But never forget the power of lobbying groups in this world. I'd like to bring up one particular report, actually, based on lobbying in the United States. As you know, in US, lobbying is legal. So it's basically legalized corruption. You pay politicians, essentially you pay politicians, companies pay politicians to say, look, vote for us, vote, and benefit us, and that's how it goes. They've done surveys after survey. What do American people want, for example? Are this. And what does the Senate and Congress vote for? It doesn't correspond. One interesting stat, in the past few years, the top 200 lobbying companies in the United States spend nearly $5 billion on lobbying politicians. $5 billion. But they got back 4.4 trillion, that's a trillion, back in taxpayer support. That's why so many wrong decisions are being made in this world because of this factor.
I agree with you with stuck in ideology. It is one thing more. A lot of decision makers are still living in industrial age. We're not in information age. We're in the fourth level, in some sort of networking age, but they are 2 generations behind us. And we in the IT sector, we know that. We are living it. We are doing cooperating between the companies in a new way. But when these decision makers, industry, politicians, academy, are stuck 2 generations behind, that's quite frustrating. And I try to be patient, but sometimes it's too much.
Would you say that cities of the future will be better for humans than they are today? To what extent are we building cities with humans in mind?
Please, I would say yes, and I would say great cities inspiring each other because we're good in different things. Meeting people, it was a conference arranged by the City of Amsterdam, it was Startup City Summits. Cities meeting each other, they do the same at the Web Summit. When we meet 100 cities together, because we can learn from each other because no one is best in everything. We need to inspire each other.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, for the human race, it's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? It's been our history. So cities will get better, wrong decisions will be made, disasters will happen, but overall, it'll get better.
To what extent are we building crime reduction into cities?
Oh, well, that is very interesting. And we can actually go far the other way, for example. In China now, as you know, they're using AI for facial recognition. Not only for facial recognition, but for gait recognition, the way you move. So they've been able to basically arrest a lot of people, criminals who've been on the run for many years, all of a sudden get caught with this system. Police people now in China are now experimenting glasses where they can actually see and the computer will tell them who is who in the whole crowd. You can see how effective it can be in terms of catching criminals, but in many authoritarian government, it can actually go the other way, where if you're making political protests, for example, or maybe just fighting for some rights, you can probably get arrested that way too. So we've got to be careful. All these technologies are great, but technology is basically neutral in that way. It doesn't judge, it's not left wing or right wing. It's how we use the technology that's important.
I can give one comment on this on AI because we in Sweden, we need to work much more with AI. We are lacking behind both the US and China. So we just built a national AI center and we need cooperation. I spoke about that in the Invest Sofia tent earlier today. And one part is the ethics of AI is very much emphasized. Well, one good example with technology could be bad, good or bad. We have one very interesting company. They are blocking child pornography. But the technology should just be used for blocking child pornography. It was one totalitarian regime wanting to use technology, and the CEO said no. It was a very good deal for him. He said, this is just used for that, nothing else. So he refused to have a good deal because of his ethics.
I mean, we are all so busy here developing all these great technologies, working with AI, you name it, all these great things. But I think we have not spent enough time thinking about the ethics and morals and all the implications that will happen. With the coming of AI, automation and all this, hundreds of millions of people, think about it, hundreds of millions of people will lose their jobs. That will happen whether we like it or not. Even if I'm a factory owner, let's say, I employ, let's say, thousands of people, I would have to automate and eventually fire my workers, whether I like it or not. That will happen. So we have to actually consider, jobs are not actually coming back. New jobs are actually not replacing all the old ones. In fact, look at United States, for example. They have lost around 5 million manufacturing jobs. What's replaced it? Basically, gig jobs. You got to work two jobs to survive. There's no health care and so forth. 95% of jobs are like this. So we haven't actually considered what's going to happen. And I think so far, no one's really worked out. When hundreds of millions of people lose their jobs, what's going to happen? How are we going to manage this situation?
But in that case, I'm a little bit opposing you because we have a shortage of skilled labor force in a lot of countries, in so many areas with aging population, who is going to take care of people, etc. Without AI, it will be catastrophe because there are lack of almost all kinds of work in a lot of European countries.
I'm not opposed to AI, as you know. I'm very pro-technology. All these things will give us a better life, you know, and take care of us. Health, in terms of health, it's going to increase in terms of, you know, and all this. But what I'm saying is, it's unavoidable that millions, hundreds of millions of jobs will be lost because of automation. We have not figured that out yet. New jobs coming in are not replacing the old ones. You cannot train, for example, manufacturing workers to become software programmers, truck drivers to become software programmers. Most people who lose manufacturing jobs, actually 50% of people who've lost manufacturing jobs never find employment again. Think about it. They go into unemployment, and that's not reflected in all the stats that we use, because once a person stops looking for work, they've been removed from the unemployment list. So that's why governments can actually be very misleading in this regard. They're showing you all the great stats. AI technology is wonderful for GDP. We all love that. You know, but it's not going to be too wonderful for people who've lost their jobs.
I'm enjoying this AI boxing match, and it's important to discuss. And I think, yes, there is issues with blue-collar workers being automated out, but also the blue-collarization of white-collar workers, those of us that do, if you like, thinking jobs or believe that we're thinking. The definition of talent in the digital age, you might say, is being able to do something that an algorithm or a robot cannot do, which means bringing our cognitive capacity to bear. So many of us are going to have to kind of wake up to a new way of working, so to speak. And of course, we have to build cities for this unknowable future. Will it be the leisure age where, you know, the economy is just totally automated so we can just enjoy a leisurely life? Or is it just a kind of, we need more high-tech factories very, very close to each other?
I think eventually we will be creating what they call a poet society, isn't it? Where if you want a job, you can do whatever you want, or whatever your skill sets allow, or if you don't want a job, there'll be some sort of minimum income to support you, because there's so much wealth being created by all these robots, you know, and automation and AI and so forth. You know, eventually we probably get there. But in the meantime, it'll be a struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I would say we'll have a shortage of personnel also in the future, and we need to train and retrain and shift jobs more time. Yeah. Every 5th year, every 10th year, you need to retrain. You need to be calculated for this. You can't stay in the same job the whole life.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, there should be training and training programs. But if you look at the stats, the stats and facts, at the best, training programs have a 15% effective rate. Think about it, yeah? Because it's very hard to train people to do a different thing. Someone's been, you know, building in a factory, building something for 20 years. You train them into something else. Come on, it's, you know, we've got to be practical here. But I mean, I do agree. We still have to do it, but it's not as effective as a lot of people claim. And we've seen the stats. It's not the best is around 15%.
Well, coming back to the sort of cities of the future thing, conceptually, do you think we need to be building living organisms? Should cities be sensing, organisms?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, that's the way you should be looking at cities. You know, like the concept of Earth being GI. Cities should be considered as living organism too. In Hangzhou, for example, in China, the city of Hangzhou, where Alibaba is from, they've actually implemented what they call city brain, which manages the traffic flow. And it's basically improved traffic flow by a very significant margin by using AI.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of time now. Just a very quick question to you both. What excites you most about cities of the future? Go.
What excites me most is trying to persuade people that are not into the IT and tech area to see the possibilities, trying to explain why they should get into it. And sometimes it could be a bit difficult, but we have the responsibility. We are into it. We are in the 4th generation of society. We need to inspire the rest.
better way, the cities will be, better master planned, so it's more comfortable, more beautiful to look at. It will be powered by renewable energy, so the air will be clean. We'll have better water management, so the water will be clean. Better waste management, or even zero waste is the focus. We'll be working in green jobs, for example, and so forth and so forth.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.